Maya Chen never thought twice about posting pictures online. Like most people her age, she shared her morning coffee, her weekend hikes, even her desk at work, but that was before she became an investigative journalist. Before she started digging into stories that powerful people wanted to stay buried. Her life changed the day she published an article about Meridian Industries. This huge company was dumping toxic waste into rivers and lakes across 3 states. Maya had spent months gathering evidence, talking to local residents who were getting sick, collecting water samples, and photographing dead fish floating in once clear streams. The article went viral overnight. Thousands of people shared it. Environmental groups praised her work. News channels wanted interviews. For the first time in her career, Maya felt like she was making a real difference in the world, but success came with a price she hadn't expected. The first sign of trouble was subtle. Strange phone calls where nobody spoke when she answered. Cars that seemed to follow her home from work, always staying just far enough behind to make her wonder if she was being paranoid. Maya told herself it was probably nothing. Big companies got upset when journalists exposed their secrets, but they usually just hired expensive lawyers, not thugs. Then things got worse. Someone broke into her apartment while she was at her sister's wedding. Nothing valuable was stolen, but all her files had been moved. Her computer had been turned on. Her notes about Meridian were scattered across her desk in a way that felt like a message. They wanted her to know they had been there. Maya stopped sleeping well after that. Every sound in the hallway made her jump. Every shadow outside her window looked like a person watching. She installed new locks, bought security cameras, and started varying her route to work. Friends noticed she seemed nervous, distracted, always checking her phone and looking over her shoulder. 3 states away, David Rodriguez was living his own nightmare. David had worked as an accountant for Meridian Industries for 5 years. He was good at his job, quiet, reliable, the kind of employee who showed up early and stayed late without complaining. He loved numbers because they told the truth. Unlike people, numbers couldn't lie or hide things or pretend to be something they weren't. That's exactly why David couldn't ignore what he found in Meridian's financial records. The company wasn't just dumping waste illegally. They were using fake accounting methods to hide the environmental cleanup costs from their shareholders. They had secret bank accounts in other countries. They were bribing local officials to look the other way. The numbers told a story of corruption that went all the way to the top of the company. David knew he had 2 choices. He could pretend he never saw the evidence and keep his comfortable job with good benefits. Or he could do the right thing and risk everything. He chose to do the right thing. David copied the financial records and turned them over to the FBI. He thought the government would protect him. He thought justice would be swift and clean. He thought his life would go back to normal once the bad guys were caught. He was wrong about all of that. Within a week of talking to the FBI, David's life started falling apart. His boss called him into the office and told him his position was being eliminated due to budget cuts. His landlord suddenly decided not to renew his lease. His car was vandalized in the parking lot at his gym. Strange men in expensive suits started showing up at places he went regularly, asking questions about him. David realized he wasn't safe anymore. He packed his belongings and moved to a different city, got a new job, changed his phone number. For a few months, he thought he had escaped. Then the pattern started again. Mysterious visitors asking his new coworkers about him. His credit cards were mysteriously canceled. His new apartment was broken into, though nothing was stolen. He moved again. And again. Each time hoping this would be the city where Meridian Industries couldn't find him. Each time discovering he was wrong. Neither Maya nor David knew the other person existed. They lived in different states, worked in different fields, had never met or spoken. But their lives had become eerily similar. They both jumped when their phones rang unexpectedly. They both avoided posting anything on social media that might reveal their location. They both had trouble trusting new people they met. Maya would lie awake at night wondering if the sounds she heard outside were just neighborhood cats or something more dangerous. David would change his walking route to work every day, never taking the same path twice. They both started paying for everything with cash, avoiding credit cards that could be tracked. The stress was wearing them down. Maya lost weight and developed dark circles under her eyes. Her editor noticed she seemed distracted during meetings. Her friends stopped inviting her to social events because she always made excuses not to go. She told herself she was being careful, but deep down, she knew she was becoming isolated and afraid. David's situation was even worse. He had already lost 2 jobs and moved 4 times in 8 months. His savings account was running low. He couldn't maintain long-term friendships when he never knew how long he would stay in one place. His family worried about him but didn't understand why he couldn't just settle down and find a normal job like his brothers and sisters. Both of them were running from the same enemy, but they were running alone. Maya had evidence of what Meridian was doing to the environment. David had proof of how the company was hiding their crimes with illegal financial tricks. Together, their information could destroy the corporation that was making their lives miserable. But they didn't know about each other yet. Maya was starting to wonder if she should just give up journalism and find a safer career. Maybe teaching, or working at a library, something quiet where powerful people wouldn't notice her. The constant fear was exhausting. She missed feeling safe in her own home. She missed sleeping through the night without wondering if every sound meant danger. David was considering leaving the country entirely. Maybe he could start over somewhere far away, change his name, find work that had nothing to do with accounting or big corporations. The FBI agent who had promised to protect him hadn't returned his calls in weeks. He was beginning to think the government couldn't or wouldn't help him. Neither of them realized that their separate struggles were about to intersect in a way that would change everything. In a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, 2 strangers would reach for the same newspaper and recognize something familiar in each other's eyes. The same fear, the same exhaustion, the same determination to survive despite the odds. But that meeting was still days away. For now, Maya and David continued their separate journeys, carrying their pieces of the puzzle that could bring down Meridian Industries, unaware that somewhere out there was another person who understood exactly what they were going through. The Portland bus station smelled like coffee and exhaust fumes. Maya pulled her jacket tighter as she stepped off the Greyhound bus, her laptop bag heavy on her shoulder. She had chosen Portland randomly, pointing at a map with her eyes closed like a child playing pin the tail on the donkey. Sometimes the best hiding places were the ones you picked without any logical reason. She had been traveling for 2 days straight, switching buses in different cities to make her trail harder to follow. Her back ached from sleeping in uncomfortable seats, and her hair felt greasy from not showering properly. But she was alive, and for now, that was enough. Maya found a cheap motel near the city center and paid with cash, using a fake name she had practiced saying until it felt natural. The room was small and clean, with thin walls and a view of the parking lot. She hung towels over the windows and moved the dresser in front of the door before finally allowing herself to collapse on the bed. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt like she could breathe. Portland was big enough to get lost in, but not so huge that she would feel completely alone. The city had a reputation for being friendly to journalists and activists. Maybe here she could figure out her next move without constantly looking over her shoulder. Meanwhile, David was arriving at the same bus station just 3 hours after Maya had left it. David had picked Portland for more practical reasons. His FBI contact had suggested the Pacific Northwest during their last conversation, claiming that Meridian's influence was weaker in that part of the country. David wasn't sure if that was true, but he was running out of options and places to hide. He carried everything he owned in a single backpack. After moving so many times, he had learned to live with just the essentials. A few changes of clothes, his laptop with encrypted files, some cash, and a photo of his family that he kept hidden in his wallet. Everything else was just stuff that could be replaced. David found a different motel than Maya, but only 6 blocks away from hers. He also paid cash and used a fake name, though his was less practiced, and the desk clerk gave him a strange look. He spent his first night in Portland, staring at the ceiling, listening to sirens in the distance, and wondering how long he could keep running before his money ran out. The next morning, both Maya and David were drawn to the same coffee shop without knowing it. Maya had always been a morning person, and even on the run, she couldn't break the habit of starting her day with good coffee. She found a small place called Rose City Roasters that had excellent reviews online and, more importantly, had large windows that let her see anyone approaching from the street. She ordered a black coffee and a blueberry muffin, then settled at a corner table where she could watch both the front door and the back exit. Old habits from her journalist days, now made more urgent by her current situation. Maya pulled out her laptop and started scrolling through news websites, looking for any mention of Meridian Industries or new developments in environmental crime cases. David arrived at the same coffee shop 20 minutes later. He had been walking around the neighborhood, trying to get a feel for the area, when the smell of fresh coffee drew him inside. Like Maya, he chose his seat carefully, picking a spot near the window where he could keep an eye on the street. He ordered the same thing Maya had, black coffee and a muffin, though his was banana nut instead of blueberry. David pulled out his phone and started checking financial news websites, a habit left over from his accounting days. He still followed the stock market, partly out of professional interest and partly because he wanted to know if Meridian's stock price ever reflected the truth about what the company was doing. Neither of them noticed the other at first. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush, filled with people heading to work and students with laptops spread across small tables. Maya and David blended into the crowd, just 2 more customers trying to start their day with caffeine and internet access. The moment that changed everything started with something completely ordinary. Previous customer had left behind a copy of the Wall Street Journal, folded and forgotten on the counter near the sugar and cream station. Both Maya and David noticed it at the same time and walked over to get it. Maya needed something to read. That wasn't on a screen. David was hoping to find more detailed financial news than what he could get on his phone. They reached for the newspaper simultaneously, their hands brushing as they both grabbed for the same corner of the paper. "Sorry," Maya said, pulling her hand back. "You can have it." "No, go ahead," David replied. "I was just looking for the business section anyway." Maya unfolded the paper and glanced at the front page, then flipped to the business section that David had mentioned. Her breath caught when she saw a small article about Meridian Industries' stock prices. The headline read, "Environmental concerns cause minor dip in Meridian shares." David noticed her reaction immediately. Maya's face had gone pale, and her grip on the newspaper had tightened. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she suddenly looked around the coffee shop as if checking for threats. "Are you okay?" David asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Maya looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. She noticed the way he had positioned himself near the exit, the careful way he had chosen his seat, the slightly haunted look in his eyes that she recognized because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. "You know about Meridian," she said. It wasn't a question. David's expression confirmed what she had guessed. His jaw tightened, and he glanced toward the windows, scanning the street outside with the same automatic vigilance that Maya had been practicing for months. "You're running from them too," David said quietly. Before Maya could answer, both of their phones buzzed with news alerts at exactly the same time. They looked down at their screens and saw the same headline. Meridian Industries announces increased security measures following recent threats. That's when they both noticed the black SUV parked across the street. The vehicle looked expensive and official, with tinted windows that made it impossible to see who was inside. 2 men in dark suits sat in the front seats, and one of them was pointing directly at the coffee shop window. Maya and David looked at each other, then back at the SUV, then at each other again. Without speaking, they both understood that their morning coffee was about to be cut short. "Back exit?" Maya asked, already gathering her things. "Yeah," David replied, stuffing his phone into his pocket and abandoning his half-eaten muffin. They left the coffee shop through the rear entrance, walking quickly but trying not to run. Running would attract attention, and attention was the last thing either of them needed. Once they were several blocks away, safely hidden among the morning crowd of commuters and shoppers, they finally stopped to catch their breath. "I'm Maya," she said, extending her hand. "David," he replied, shaking it. Neither of them gave their last names. In their world, first names were safer, and trust had to be earned slowly and carefully. "So," Maya said, looking back toward the direction they had come from, "I'm guessing you have some interesting stories about Meridian Industries?" David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You could say that. What about you?" "Environmental journalist," Maya explained. "I wrote some things they didn't like." "Accountant," David said. "Well, former accountant. I found some things they didn't want found." They walked in comfortable silence for a few blocks, both of them processing the strange coincidence that had brought them together. Two people running from the same enemy, meeting by accident in a coffee shop in a city neither of them had planned to visit. "This is going to sound crazy," Maya said as they reached a small park filled with families and joggers. "But I think we might be able to help each other." David stopped walking and looked at her carefully. Trust was dangerous in his situation, but so was isolation. He had been running alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone understand his problems. "What did you have in mind?" he asked. Maya smiled for the first time in weeks. "How about we find somewhere safe to talk and I'll tell you about toxic waste dumping. Then you can tell me about whatever financial crimes you discovered." David nodded slowly. For the first time since he had become a whistleblower, he wasn't facing his problems alone. Neither of them realized it yet, but their accidental meeting would change everything about their fight against Meridian Industries. And maybe, if they were very lucky, it would change everything about their lives too. Working together turned out to be more complicated than Maya and David had expected. Not the investigation part, that was going better than either of them had dared to hope. The problem was that spending 18 hours a day together in small, cramped spaces while constantly watching for danger had a way of breaking down the normal barriers between people. They had found a small apartment to rent by the week, paying cash to a landlord who didn't ask too many questions. The place was barely bigger than a hotel room, with a tiny kitchen, one bedroom, and a living room just large enough for a couch and a folding table where they spread out their evidence. Maya took the bedroom, David slept on the couch, and they both pretended that the arrangement was purely practical, which it was, mostly. Two people were safer than one. They could take turns sleeping while the other kept watch. They could share expenses and cover more ground when gathering additional evidence. But somewhere between the late-night strategy sessions and the early morning coffee runs, something else started happening. David began to notice small things about Maya that had nothing to do with their investigation. The way she hummed quietly when she was concentrating on her laptop. How she always made enough coffee for both of them without being asked. The fact that she kept a small cactus on the windowsill because she said every home needed something, alive and green, even if it was temporary. Maya found herself paying attention to David's habits too. He was naturally protective, always positioning himself between her and the door when they were in public. He had a gentle way of explaining complicated financial concepts that made her feel smart instead of stupid. When she had nightmares about being caught by Meridian's people, she would wake up to find that David had left a glass of water and some crackers on the table next to the couch, as if he somehow knew she would need them. Their work was progressing, faster than either had imagined possible. David's financial records perfectly matched Maya's environmental evidence. They could trace specific illegal dumping incidents to exact dollar amounts that Meridian had saved by avoiding proper cleanup. They had emails from company executives discussing how to hide their crimes from government inspectors. They had bank statements showing payments to officials who were supposed to be enforcing environmental laws. "This is incredible," Maya said, one evening, looking at the timeline they had created on the wall of their small apartment. "We have everything: names, dates, amounts, locations. This isn't just evidence of environmental crime, it's evidence of a conspiracy that goes all the way to the top of the company." David nodded, but he looked worried instead of excited. "That's exactly why I'm scared. We're not just threatening their profits anymore. We're threatening to put executives in prison. People have been eliminated for a lot less than what we have here." Maya understood his concern. Over the past few weeks, they had both noticed signs that Meridian was getting closer to finding them. More black SUVs in their neighborhood. Phone. Calls to local businesses asking about new residents. Their old motels had been visited by men asking questions about guests who matched their descriptions. "David," Maya said carefully, "what if we don't make it out of this alive?" It was the question they had both been avoiding, but Maya felt like it needed to be said out loud. They were about to go up against a billion-dollar corporation that had already proven it was willing to hurt people to protect its secrets. David was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that too," he admitted. "And I realized something. Even if we don't survive this, at least we're not facing it alone anymore." Maya looked at him across their small living room, with evidence of corporate crimes spread across every surface, and felt something shift inside her chest. When had David stopped being just a partner in this investigation and started being something more important? "Can I tell you something?" Maya asked. "Of course. Before I met you, I was starting to think that maybe I should just give up. Find a new career, maybe move to another country, just disappear and let someone else fight Meridian. I was so tired of being afraid all the time." "What changed your mind?" "You did." Maya's voice was soft but certain. "Having someone who understands what this is like, who believes the same things I believe, who's willing to take the same risks. It makes everything feel possible instead of hopeless." David moved from the couch to sit next to Maya at their makeshift desk. "I know what you mean. I spent months thinking I was crazy for throwing away my entire life to expose these crimes. But seeing your evidence, working with you, it reminds me why I thought this was important in the first place." They sat close together, surrounded by papers and laptops and the weight of everything they had discovered. Maya could smell David's soap, something simple and clean that reminded her of safety. David could see the small scar on Maya's hand from when she had cut herself collecting water samples in Louisiana. "Maya," David said quietly, "I need to tell you something too." "What?" "I think I'm falling in love with you." Maya's breath caught. It wasn't a surprise, exactly. The feeling had been growing between them for weeks, in stolen glances and accidental touches, and moments of understanding that went deeper than their shared danger. But hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "David," she whispered, "we can't. This situation, what we're doing, it's too dangerous to get emotionally involved." "I know," David said. "I know it's complicated and risky and probably stupid. But I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone before. And if something happens to us tomorrow, I didn't want to regret not telling you." Maya turned to face him fully. "What if we survive this? What if we actually succeed in bringing down Meridian and get our lives back? What then?" "Then we figure it out together," David said simply. "We take it one day at a time and see if what we have here can work in the real world. And if we don't survive, then at least we had this. However long it lasts, at least we had something real and good in the middle of all this chaos." Maya reached for David's hand. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of Meridian? Of them, yes. But also of this. Of us. I've never been in love with someone while running for my life before. I don't know how to do both things at the same time. David squeezed her hand gently. Maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now. Maybe we just take it one moment at a time. Maya looked around their small apartment at the evidence that could destroy a corporation, at the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word. One moment at a time, she agreed. Outside their window, Portland continued its normal life. People walked their dogs, ordered takeout, watched movies, complained about traffic. All the ordinary things that Maya and David couldn't do anymore, at least not safely. But inside their temporary home, with danger closing in from all sides, they had found something that felt worth fighting for beyond just justice and truth. They had found each other. The next morning brought news that changed everything. David's FBI contact finally returned his calls with information that would either save their lives or get them killed. Agent Martinez wanted to meet, and she had a plan that would require Maya and David to trust the government with their lives and their evidence. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Maya fell asleep in David's arms on the small couch, both of them surrounded by the papers that could bring down Meridian Industries. For the first time in months, neither of them had nightmares. They had each other to keep the bad dreams away. Finding a safe place to talk turned out to be harder than Maya and David had expected. Every coffee shop felt too exposed. Every restaurant seemed to have too many people who might be listening. They walked through downtown Portland for almost an hour, both of them nervous and checking over their shoulders, before David suggested Washington Park. Parks are good, Maya agreed. Open spaces, lots of witnesses, hard for anyone to sneak up on us. They took the bus to avoid walking the entire distance, sitting in different sections and pretending not to know each other. Maya had learned this trick during her journalism work when meeting sources who couldn't be seen with reporters. David had picked up similar habits during his months of running from Meridian. Washington Park was perfect for their needs. Families were having picnics, joggers were running the trails, and tourists were taking pictures of the rose garden. It was the kind of normal, everyday scene that made both Maya and David remember what life used to feel like before they became fugitives. They found a bench overlooking the rose garden, far enough from other people to talk privately, but close. Enough to the main path that they wouldn't look suspicious. Maya had brought coffee for both of them from a small shop near the bus stop, and they sat drinking it while watching children play on the nearby playground. So, Maya said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "You said you were an accountant." 5 years with Meridian Industries, David confirmed. Started right out of college. Thought I was going to have a nice, boring career doing tax returns and budget reports. What changed your mind? David stared at his coffee cup for a moment, organizing his thoughts. I found things that didn't add up. At first I thought it was just mistakes, you know? Big companies have lots of transactions. Sometimes numbers get entered wrong or files get mixed up. But the more I looked, the more I realized it wasn't mistakes. Maya leaned forward slightly. What kind of things? Money going to companies that didn't exist. Expenses for environmental cleanup that never happened. Payments to government officials that were labeled as consulting fees. Bank accounts in countries where Meridian doesn't even do business. David's voice got quieter as he spoke. Millions of dollars being moved around to hide what the company was really doing. And you documented all of this? I copied everything I could find, financial records, emails between executives, bank statements, transaction histories. I spent months building a complete picture of how they were hiding their illegal activities. Maya nodded slowly. David's information sounded like it could be the missing piece of her own investigation. What about the environmental stuff? Did you find anything about waste dumping or pollution? That's where most of the hidden money was going, David explained. They were supposed to be spending millions on proper waste disposal and environmental protection. Instead, they were dumping everything illegally and using fake accounting to make it look like they were following the law. Maya felt her heart racing. David, I think your financial records and my environmental evidence could be connected. I've been investigating Meridian's dumping in Texas and Louisiana. I have photos, water test results, interviews with local residents who got sick from the pollution. Really? David turned to look at her directly. I have the bank records showing exactly how much money they saved by not doing proper cleanup. I know which executives authorized the illegal dumping, and I have emails where they discuss covering it up. For the first time in months, Maya felt hope. Separately, our evidence is good, but maybe not enough to bring down a company this big. But together we might actually have a chance, David finished. They spent the next hour, sharing more details about their discoveries. Maya showed David photos on her phone of dead fish and polluted water. David explained the complicated financial tricks Meridian used to hide their crimes from shareholders and government inspectors. The more they talked, the clearer it became that they had stumbled onto something much bigger than either had realized alone. The question is, Maya said as the afternoon sun began to set over the park, what do we do with all this information? I already tried going to the FBI, David admitted. They seemed interested at first, but then communication just stopped. My contact hasn't returned my calls in weeks. I'm starting to think they either can't help or won't help. What about publishing? The story? Maya suggested. I still have contacts at newspapers and environmental magazines. If we could get this information out to the public, Meridian would just sue everyone involved and tie up the story in court for years, David said. Plus, they've already proven they're willing to threaten people to keep them quiet. Any journalist who published this would become a target just like us. They sat in silence for a while, watching the families pack up their picnic supplies and head home as evening approached. The normal, safe lives of these strangers felt impossibly distant from their own situation. There's something else, Maya said quietly. I think they're getting closer to finding us. The break-in at my apartment in Chicago was just the beginning. After that, there were more incidents. My car tires were slashed. Someone called my editor asking questions about my current projects. I got threatening emails that were traced back to fake accounts. David nodded grimly. Same here. It's like they have unlimited resources to track us down. New city, new job, new apartment, doesn't matter. They always find me eventually. How long do you think we have before they track us to Portland? Maybe a few weeks if we're careful, David guessed. But they found me in Denver within a month, and I thought I had covered my tracks pretty well there. Maya pulled her jacket tighter as the evening air grew cool. David, I have an idea, but you're probably going to think I'm crazy. At this point, crazy might be our best option. What are you thinking? What if we stop running and start fighting? Back? Maya's voice was steady, despite the fear in her eyes. We both have pieces of the puzzle. Maybe together we have enough evidence to force someone to pay attention. The FBI, the newspapers, Congress, somebody. David was quiet for a long moment. You realize that would mean putting ourselves in even more danger. Right now, they're hunting us, but we're still just problems they want to make disappear quietly. If we go public, we become direct threats to their entire operation. We're already direct threats, Maya pointed out. The only difference is whether we face that threat while running or while standing our ground. A jogger passed by their bench, breathing heavily and checking her fitness watch. Maya and David both tensed automatically, then relaxed when they realized she was just an ordinary person exercising. Their reaction reminded them both of how exhausting it was to live in constant fear. If we're going to do this, David said, slowly, we need a plan. We can't just walk into the FBI office or call up the New York Times and hope for the best. We need to be smart about it. Agreed. We need to organize all our evidence, make sure we have backups of everything, and figure out the best way to release the information so it can't be suppressed or discredited. We'll also need to find a safe place to work, David added. Somewhere they can't find us while we put everything together. And we'll need to watch each other's backs, Maya said. Two people are harder to eliminate than one person working. Alone. David extended his hand to Maya. Partners? Maya shook it firmly. Partners. As they walked back toward the bus stop, both Maya and David felt something they hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't quite confidence, and it certainly wasn't safety, but it was something close to determination. They were still afraid, still hunted, still facing impossible odds against a powerful corporation with unlimited resources, but they weren't facing those odds alone anymore. For the first time since their separate fights against Meridian had begun, Maya and David had someone who understood exactly what they were going through, someone who believed their story because they were living the same nightmare, someone who had evidence that matched their own and might finally be enough to expose the truth. The bus ride back to downtown Portland was quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet. They were both thinking about the work ahead of them, the risks they would be taking, and the possibility that they might actually succeed in bringing down the company that had turned their lives upside down. Neither of them mentioned the other feeling that was growing alongside their professional partnership. The relief of not being alone, the comfort of having someone to trust, the strange way that sharing danger had created a bond between them that felt deeper than friendship. That conversation would come later. For now, they had a corporation to fight. Agent Martinez looked exactly like what Maya had expected from an FBI investigator. Professional, serious, with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. She met them in the parking garage of a downtown office building, the kind of location that Maya would have thought was too much like a movie if she wasn't living through it herself. "I apologize for the dramatic meeting place," Martinez said after checking that they weren't followed. "But Meridian has contacts everywhere, including some government agencies. We have to be careful about who might be listening." David stepped closer to Maya instinctively. "You said you had a plan." "We've been building a case against Meridian Industries for almost 2 years," Martinez explained. "But we needed insider evidence to make it stick. Financial records that could only come from someone with access to their internal systems, and environmental documentation that could prove the scope of their illegal activities." "You mean you've known about their crimes this whole time?" Maya asked, feeling a surge of anger. "People have been getting sick from their pollution and you've just been waiting for better evidence?" "I understand your frustration," Martinez said calmly. "But taking down a corporation this size requires more than just knowing they're breaking the law. We need evidence that will hold up in federal court, testimony from credible witnesses, and a case so strong that Meridian can't buy their way out of it with expensive lawyers." "What do you need from us?" David asked. "Your financial records, Mr. Rodriguez, combined with Ms. Chen's environmental evidence, give us everything we need to file federal charges, but we need both of you to testify in front of a grand jury. Your testimony, combined with the documents you've gathered, should be enough to secure indictments against Meridian's top executives." Maya and David looked at each other. Testifying meant going public with their identities. It meant giving up any chance of disappearing and starting over somewhere else. "What happens to us after we testify?" Maya asked. "Federal witness protection is an option," Martinez said. "New identities, relocation assistance, ongoing security support. It's not an easy life, but it would be safe." "And if we don't want to disappear forever?" David asked. "Then we do everything we can to make sure Meridian Industries is no longer in a position to threaten anyone," Martinez replied. "Which brings me to the other part of the plan." She pulled out a tablet and showed them a timeline. "We want to coordinate your testimony with the publication of Ms. Chen's story. Maximum impact, minimum opportunity for Meridian to suppress the bull information or threaten witnesses." Maya felt her heart racing. "You want me to publish the story?" "Not just any story, the complete story, with all the evidence, all the financial details, everything. We want to release it the same day that federal agents execute search warrants at Meridian facilities across the country." "That's going to put us in incredible danger," David pointed out. "For about 6 hours," Martinez agreed. Between the time the story goes live and the time Meridian's executives are arrested. But after that, threatening you becomes threatening federal witnesses in a high-profile case. Even corporations aren't usually stupid enough to try that. Maya and David spent the next hour going over the details of the plan. The timeline was tight and risky. Maya would need to write her story and submit it to a major newspaper within a week. David would need to organize his financial evidence and prepare for grand jury testimony. Both of them would need to trust that the FBI could protect them during the most dangerous part of the process. "There's one more thing," Martinez said as they prepared to leave. "This case is going to be huge news. Your names and faces are going to be everywhere. There's no going back to quiet, anonymous lives after this." "Good," Maya said firmly. "I'm tired of hiding." David nodded in agreement. "We've been running for months. It's time to stand our ground." The week that followed was the most intense of either of their lives. Maya worked 18-hour days writing and rewriting her article, making sure every fact was perfect and every source was protected. David organized years of financial records into a timeline that even non-accountants could understand. They barely slept, living on coffee and takeout food while racing against their deadline. But they also grew closer during those exhausting days. The pressure of their situation had stripped away all the normal games that people play when they're getting to know each other. They had seen each other afraid, determined, angry, and hopeful. They had learned to work as a team when their lives depended on it. "Maya," David said one night as they took a break from their work, "are you sure about this? Once your story publishes, there's no taking it back." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Maya replied. "This is why I became a journalist, to tell stories that matter, to expose truths that powerful people want to hide. Even if it means we can never have a normal relationship. Even if we're always going to be the couple who brought down Meridian Industries instead of just David and Maya." Maya looked at him across their small apartment, surrounded by evidence of corporate crimes and empty coffee cups and the life they had built together while fighting for justice. "David, I don't want a normal relationship with someone else. I want whatever kind of relationship we can have together, normal or not." The morning Maya's story went live, they watched the news coverage from a safe house that the FBI had provided. The article was the lead story on every major news website. Television reporters were standing outside Meridian facilities as federal agents executed search warrants. The company's stock price was dropping by the minute. By afternoon, 3 Meridian executives had been arrested. By evening, the CEO had resigned, and the company had announced it was cooperating fully with federal investigators. "We did it," Maya said, watching a news report about the environmental cleanup that Meridian would now be forced to fund. "We did," David agreed, pulling her close. 6 months later, Meridian Industries declared bankruptcy. The company was broken, up and sold, with the proceeds going to environmental cleanup and compensation for the communities that had been harmed by their pollution. Several executives were sentenced to prison time for environmental crimes and financial fraud. Maya won awards for her environmental reporting. David testified before Congress about the need for stronger corporate oversight. They were invited to speak at journalism schools and business ethics conferences. But the best part, Maya thought, was coming home to their small house in Portland at the end of each day. David had insisted on a security system that was probably overkill, but Maya didn't mind. She had planted roses in the backyard, something she had always wanted to do but never felt settled enough to try. Some evenings they talked about whether they would have found each other under normal circumstances, whether their love was built on shared trauma or genuine compatibility, whether it could survive in a world where their biggest worry was what to make for dinner instead of whether they would survive the night. "I think about that sometimes, too," David said one evening as they sat in their garden watching the roses bloom. "But then I realize it doesn't matter how we found each other. What matters is what we choose to do now." "And what do we choose?" Maya asked. "We choose this," David said, gesturing at their home, their garden, their quiet life that had grown from the chaos of their fight against Meridian. We choose each other every day in all the small ways that matter. Maya smiled, thinking about how far they had come from that first terrified meeting in a Portland coffee shop. I love you, David. I love you too, Maya. They kept one photo, from their running days, framed in their living room. It showed them standing outside the federal courthouse on the day David testified, holding hands and squinting in the sunlight. They looked tired and nervous, but also determined and unafraid. Maya liked the photo because it reminded her that some love stories begin with impossible circumstances and somehow find their way to happiness anyway. Sometimes you have to lose everything else to discover what truly matters. Sometimes the best relationships are forged in crisis and strengthened by choosing to face danger together. And sometimes, when you're running from the same enemy, you discover that you're actually running toward each other. The corporate enemy that had brought them together was gone, but what they had built while fighting it remained. Not just as survivors of a difficult time, but as partners who had chosen each other when everything else was uncertain, and who kept choosing each other every day in their new, safer, quieter life. Their love story had started with fear and danger, but it continued with roses in the backyard and coffee in the morning, and the simple, profound choice to build a life together, one ordinary day at a time.